Hey everyone, Alex Late here from Tried and True Mortgages with another episode of our Tried and True Mortgages Essentials. I am joined by a special guest, Victoria. She is going to teach us all about rent to own and everything you need to know about it, whether it's for you, it could be useful for you in the future, and more. So thank you very much, Victoria, for joining me.
Thanks, Alex, for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So I guess to start is, what is rent to own? Why would somebody get into it?
Great question. So rent to own is an alternative path to home ownership for people who can't currently qualify for a mortgage today. So maybe they haven't been able to save enough for a down payment, or maybe they have some credit blemishes or lack of credit. So they're not able to get a mortgage, but they have some other fundamentals that will allow them to come into the rent to own program and be successful in gaining home ownership.
Okay, so essentially, if somebody doesn't have that down payment, for example, they haven't had enough chance to build it up, this is something to help them over that time, or would it even help with somebody maybe whose credit score is not the best right now, or income?
Yeah, exactly. So when it comes to down payment, as you know, and maybe the audience knows, you need at least 5% for your actual down payment, and then you need your closing costs as well, which can be like closer to maybe 7%.
That's right.
To come into a rent-to-own program, we still do need some down payment, but not as much. We require 4%. So it's a little bit easier to come into the rent-to-own program in that sense. And then we do help by putting a plan together for them to accumulate the rest of the down payment that they're going to need in order to take ownership of that home at the end of the program. And
I see. Okay.
I just want to add one other thing, because I think there's a really important piece is when people are saving for a down payment today to get a mortgage, they're kind of chasing a moving target because the housing market fluctuates. So they don't know exactly how much they need to save.
Sure.
When you come into a rent-to-own program, we're basically locking in the purchase price of the home when they buy it from us in the future. So they know exactly how much they need to save for their down payment, and we put a concrete plan in place for them to save that required amount.
Wow, yeah, that is a great incentive because, like you said, it's a moving target. So if they know I need to save for a $500,000 purchase or 700,000, whatever it is, then they'll actually have that sort of goalpost and it won't be moving. Interesting.
Exactly.
Now, when you say they're saving for the down payment and they have to put 4% just to get into the program, do they have to get to 5% or are they trying to get to 20%?
Great question. Yeah, our goal is to get them to 10% of their purchase price. So we have some buffer. We do tend to be a little bit conservative because they're typically in the program for somewhere between 2 and 4 years. Things in the market can change. So we just want to make sure we have a little bit of room there. So we do try to get them to 10% of their purchase price.
10%. That makes sense. And then at least that probably reduce their payment a little bit, CMHC, and so on.
Exactly. Yep.
And then is there a required minimum income? Because I'm assuming you still have to be able to qualify in the future, even though you might not be able to today.
Yes, absolutely. So when we are accepting people into the program, we are definitely looking at income. We're actually underwriting in a sense the same way that a mortgage broker would to make sure that on the back end, when they are taking over ownership, they're going to be able to get approved by a lender. So there is a minimum income requirement. Of course, it varies by the market that they're looking to purchase in, but a typical rule of thumb is their income needs to be equal to 20 to 25% of the value of the home.
So the income. Now, what happens if somebody doesn't end up saving the entire amount over the 2 to 4 years, like you mentioned?
Yeah, so we actually have that written into legal contracts that outlines they're going to provide us with that payment every month. So in addition to their rent, we also charge them what's called an option payment. That option payment does a couple of things. It secures their right to buy that property from us in the future, but it also acts as that forced down payment savings. And it does come to us and we do hold it for them. So again, when they take over ownership and they go to get a mortgage at the end, we can show, here are the savings that the rent-to-own client has provided to us that's going to go towards their down payment.
Okay.
So we're not actually...
really cool.
Sorry to interrupt. We're not actually having them set it aside on their own. They are required to turn it over to us.
To give it to you as almost like a car loan or a short-term loan type of idea.
Yeah, you could look at it that way for sure.
Wow. So when you say us, are you referring to, so who is us, I guess, in this case, and what's
Yeah.
your specific
So
role?
us is Hello Homeowner, which is my company.
Okay, yeah.
And I work with investors. The
Okay.
investors are actually the ones who purchase the home on behalf of the rent-to-own client, right? So
Okay.
when a
Yep.
rent-to-own client comes to us and they're approved for the program, we basically
Hmm.
tell them, okay, you're approved for this amount.
Hmm.
They're actually able to go out on the market with a realtor and find a home that meets that budget that they've been approved for.
Yeah.
My investor will purchase that home for them. And I
Okay.
basically manage the process between the rent to own client and the investor. So when I say
Yes.
us, I really mean myself, Hello Homeowner,
Yes.
and my investor.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've seen sort of the benefits on the tenant or future homeowner side. What's, I guess, the major benefit to the investor?
Great question. So, from an investor's perspective, it is one of the more passive investments. When
Okay.
you have a rent to own client in a home, that rent to own client really is acting as the homeowner. They're
Mhm.
expected to do all of the maintenance, the repairs. So there's really no middle of the night phone calls from that
Mm.
tenant, right? So in
Yes.
that case,
Yes.
it's a more passive investment.
Okay.
It also has more predictable returns because again, you aren't having those maintenance costs coming up because the rent to own client is expected to take that over.
Hmm.
And it also has a concrete timeline and a solid exit plan. The exit plan is
Yes.
that rent to own client is going to purchase the home at the end. So the
Yeah.
investor knows exactly what the timeline is and exactly
Yes.
what their return is going to be.
Really? Okay. So that's pretty good, I would say, investment strategy for somebody who wants to be an investor in real estate, because I guess the only downside for them is they are locking in at a price, whereas the market may increase more than what potentially the tenant is going to buy the house from them for.
That is a possibility for sure. In the interim, your cash flow is going to be higher than
Okay.
like a standard long-term rental. So it comes down to what's the investor's goals. Are they looking
Okay.
for cash flow supplement?
Yep.
There's a lot of people right now I know who are, they're feeling a little bit of pain. They're bleeding a
Mhm.
little bit of money, maybe with some other investments that they've taken
Yes.
on, and they're actually
Yes.
looking to rent to own investments to help stop the bleeding, if you will.
Yes. 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 Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, so from both sides, there is a lot of benefits, it would seem. I don't think this program is really too well known. Even me myself, I don't know too much about it. I didn't realize it was structured so well that you would go out and find the investor, and I suppose you find the tenant as well.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So I always just used to think, okay, somebody's renting out a property, an investor, and then they find a tenant that do the rent own. This seems a little bit more, or a lot more structured, and I guess you would say straightforward. So,
Yeah. So what you've talked about where an investor has a property and they decide to rent to own, that does happen. And I have
mhm,
had investors come to me as well saying, hey, I have a property, would it be a good rent to own? It
sure.
can be, those can be good opportunities. The
Hmm.
challenge or the little bit of difference with that is now you're looking for a rent to own client who's going to be happy in that particular home
Okay.
versus I
Yep.
really look at it from the perspective of I want my rent to own client to choose the home they're going to be happy in.
Yes.
That's it's a little bit more limiting in that case. So there are
Sure.
some companies out there who say, here, I have these homes for rent to own, choose from these. I
Mm-hmm.
don't do it that way. I do it what we call tenant first. I
Hmm.
find the tenant or the rent to own client,
Yep.
qualify them, and then they can go and choose a home on the market.
Okay. Is there a maximum purchase price then that you guys sort of require, or minimum and maximum?
In terms of what the tenant buyer can go out and purchase,
Yeah. Yeah.
it depends on their income and
Okay.
the amount of deposit or down payment that they bring. So
That makes
typically
sense.
for
Yeah.
rent to own, we don't really go above like 750,000. We actually try to
Hmm.
stay on the lower end. It's just a little bit
Yeah.
less risky for everybody involved.
That makes sense. Yeah. And then I guess for the investors portion as well, how do you guys determine what the buy price will be in the future?
Good question. So we do look at historicals to see what the appreciation has been,
Hmm.
and we apply an appreciation per year of the rent to own term to determine their future purchase price.
Okay.
One really important thing that we do
Yep.
upfront is we're actually, when we're qualifying someone for the program, we're
Yep.
qualifying them for that future purchase price, right?
Hmm.
That's super
Hmm.
important. We might buy the house for $450,000 today, but
Hmm.
if that rent-to-own client is going to be purchasing it from us for, let's say, 515 and 2 or 3 years from now, we need to
Yep.
make sure that they can qualify for that based on their income and that they have enough, again, down payment to qualify as well.
Okay, so it's a bit of a negotiation, but at the end of the day, the tenant or the person doing the rent to own has to be able to qualify the future.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, specifically for your cases, where do you mainly do this process or
Yeah.
help people with this?
Yeah. So I'm predominantly focused in Ontario.
Okay.
I do a
Yeah.
lot in Sarnia, Windsor,
Hmm.
Chatham, St. Thomas, that general area. But I am open to most markets in Ontario where the price points are, like I said, 750 or less.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I guess I would probably ask, what are the most common questions you get from clients about the drawbacks of this program? Like, what are the major, I guess, drawbacks to even doing this?
Yeah, good question. So when they're in the program, their payments
Hmm.
will be higher than if they were
Okay.
just renting because they're
Yep.
paying those two pieces. They're paying rent and they're paying that option payment. The rent
Hmm.
is set to market rent. So right off the bat, they're paying market rent, then
Hmm.
they're paying additional to go towards their down payment. Now, is that actually a con per se? If they were trying to save towards a down payment for a house, they would be doing the same thing in theory,
Sure. Yep.
but their payments will be higher while they're in the program. In terms of other cons, they do have to take care of the property. But again, if
Sure.
you're looking to be a homeowner, like you're looking to take on that responsibility anyhow. So again, is it really a con? I don't know.
That's right. Yeah, that's not really. Have you ever seen, I guess the only other thing I can think of is, have you ever seen something where the investor wants to withdraw early or pull? I know there's a contract, but let's say their finances aren't doing too well and they can't even cover the mortgage payments. Have you seen that where they like, oh, I need to sell this property?
So I haven't seen that because when we set up the contract, the tenant buyer or the rent to own client, they're
Hmm.
paying their rent, they're paying that option payment. So we,
Yes.
in theory, we should have enough income from that to be able to cover the mortgage payment. So it shouldn't
Yeah.
be a situation where the investor can't cover the payment. But let's
Mm.
say there was some other scenario and that investor needed out.
Yep.
We would look for another investor to take over that agreement.
Okay. Cool. Cool. I think that really covers a lot of it. That's sounds like a great program, especially for people who are looking to get in. It is legal in Canada, right? There's nothing against it in terms of bylaw or
It,
anything like that.
no, it is absolutely legal. We do work with the mortgage insurers to understand what their requirements are when it comes to
Yeah.
doing rent to own.
Okay.
They basically want to make sure that, we're not taking advantage of these people. So
Mhm.
we make sure our contracts are built in alignment with the insurer's requirements so that we don't
Okay.
get ourselves or the rent to own clients into any trouble. We ultimately want them to succeed.
Of course, of course. And then I guess that to build onto that, the tenant, do they find their own lawyer or do they use your lawyer? Because you said you have these contracts already set up. How
Yeah.
does that
So
work?
I have standard template contracts that I've
Yeah.
developed with my lawyer.
Okay.
They can seek their own legal advice. I do
Sure.
recommend that they do. They don't have to, but they certainly can have a lawyer review their documents for sure. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. It's probably always a good idea just to get a second opinion and make sure
absolutely.
it's sort of right for you. Now, do they actually ever meet the investor or is it just sort of just through you?
Typically, they don't meet the investor. I try to make the investment as passive as possible. So
Mhm.
I really am the manager and I am the one that interacts with both the rent to own client and the investor as kind of the middleman.
Okay. Okay, cool. Now I have to ask this hard question. So in this case, you're the middle person. How would you get paid then?
Yeah, so I take a fee
Hmm.
for basically my services to find the rent to own client, qualify them, put together their success plan to make sure
Yes.
that they will be able to exit successfully and managing them through the program to the end. So I do take a fee in order to do that. That's how I get paid.
Okay, and the fee will depend on obviously the purchase price, mortgage, probably all those details.
Yeah, there's a few variables for sure.
Okay, very cool. Now, how can people reach out to you, find you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me. I'm on social media, on Instagram. Maybe I'll send it to you, but it's
Yeah,
at
sure. I'll put it in the
Victoria.
description.
Yeah,
I'll put it
it's
in the
at.
description.
Okay, perfect. And then I have my website, hello-homeowner.com, or email hello@hello-homeowner.com.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I think it's been really informative, and I think will open a lot of people's eyes to other options, especially if they think, the market's way too high right now, or I can't build that down payment. This probably gives a lot of people that capability to actually get into a home. And if they're going to be renting anyways, you might as well rent a place that you're just going to buy in the future.
I agree. And even if you're not sure if it's something that you would be approved for, I'm happy to talk to anybody and even put together a plan to help you prepare to come into the program as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Very cool. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me.